There are more Cape Verdeans here than in Cape Verde. That's just
In fact, my first job was cleaning an office with her in Back Bay, Washington, D.C., which is where I met, the woman of my life, the mother of my child. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Come on. She's obviously was picking her, my little girl, in daycare in Roxbury, and she said she's in the car and she's about to get out, and his pop, right? And we have to essentially challenge the narrative, right? That others are creating now. We're bad. They were bringing guns. They were drug dealers. Right?
Welcome to Comunicas TV. Today we'll have the honor to talk with Evandro Carvalho, Dorchester neighbor and our state representative for the 5th Suffolk District. Before starting the interview, I want to send a message to the neighbors of the global village. I want to tell you that, despite the cynicism of a few and the oppressive stereotypes, you can have a better life and contribute to the construction of a better society. Regardless of your origin, how you look physically, how was your upbringing, regardless of how hard life can be under any circumstance, you can. Because what matters is what is inside of you, the real you, your individuality. Love yourself and then go love your neighbor, including the annoying ones. It is in the closeness where we can make a better world. So now let's focus on our neighbor, Evandro. Welcome, Evandro.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you for coming. It's how do you pronounce your last name?
Well, in many different ways, to be perfectly honest. It's a I'm Cape Verdean. I was born in Cape Verde. It is a Portuguese language spelling and sound. So if you want to be technically correct, it's Carvalho. But in the U.S., we're English. It could be Carvalho or Carvalho, right? So,
Okay.
but that's I usually say Evandro Carvalho.
Yeah, I heard that, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, so I did some research about Cape Verde. I think that is amazing country, amazing culture too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel that it's have a lot of similarities with all the Latin countries. So.
Yes. It's what makes America great to an extent. It's the melting pot, of the world. It's the melting pot of democracy. So, Cape Verdeans, but one small percentage of it. But there's a large population of Cape Verdeans in the U.S., particularly in the Boston area, and the area where we are now in Dorchester, Roxbury, and some of the other parts of Boston. So, but we are, a proud people. Originated obviously countries in Africa, right? But we have, there's children of Cape Verde all over the country, all over the world. In fact, I was at an event with the president of the Parliament of Cape Verde, National Parliament, right? And he mentioned something that I believe could be true, is that probably every country in the world there's at least one Cape Verdean. Yeah.
It is true that there are more Cape Verdeans here than in Cape Verde. That's just.
I don't know if that's completely true. There's some new information about this that I haven't personally verified, but there is more Cape Verdeans abroad than in Cape Verde.
Oh, okay.
I've recently heard that there's more Cape Verdean in the U.S. than in Cape Verde. I'm not sure about that particularly, but there's certainly more Cape Verdeans abroad outside of the country than there is in Cape Verde.
Very interesting. So let's talk about you as a person and now, as also an American, obviously.
Yes.
So, tell us a little bit about, your childhood. How was that? Where did you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I had an amazing childhood. Barefoot in the outskirts in the countryside, essentially, of Cape Verde, outside of Praia, which is the capital, 2 minutes from Praia, capital of the country, which is also in the island of Santiago, which is the largest island and the most populated island. I grew up with, my grandparents' farm, essentially, as I mentioned earlier, barefoot, playing soccer, having to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning to go care for animals and work in the fields, and then going to school and pitching in, with chores around the house and playing a lot of soccer with my friends. But reflecting on it, it was really, without worry, right, to a certain extent. My mom came to the U.S. when I was 9 years old, and unfortunately my father died when I was 11, 2 years later. So I grew up with my grandparents. I was raised by my grandparents, I should say. But we never, I guess, to a certain extent, missed anything, right? Even though we technically were orphans and lived with our grandparents, but we lived off the land, and there's a sense of belonging in the family, right? So we never missed anything, but we definitely came from what folks often would say humble beginnings. If you look at some of the pictures when I was younger, definitely, not a worry in sight, right? No crime, certainly no shootings like in Dorchester, right? People died, obviously, like my father died, but it's usually of natural cause.
And he died there?
He died there, yeah. Before I came here. So I was born in 1981. I'm 36 years old. My mom came here in 1990. I was 9.
Okay.
For the same reasons that, all of us come, right? She had 4 children and wanted to better lives of her family. She was a, educated teacher, was doing, somewhat well in Cape Verde in terms of, at least if you look at the conditions of everyone else, because she was an educated woman by all standards, but wanted to improve the quality of lives for our children, which is, what she did when she came here. When my father died, she married an American citizen, and we came then 6 years later.
So, did you arrive to Boston specifically?
Yes. I grew up, we're on Dot Ave. I grew up on Dot Ave, Columbia Road area.
Okay.
I was raised, so I came into, my mom lived in a triple-decker, rented home in a triple-decker, Columbia Road, Dot Ave, and it's actually, the street is called Harbor View Street. So if you go down this route all the way before you take that right to go to the highway, it's about a few blocks from there on the right.
Okay.
And I went to Madison Park High School, so I would walk over to up in this corner, catch the bus 15 to go to Madison. At that age, 15, no English, trying to blend into society, trying to figure out where you fit in. Curious, obviously. So it was a tough time. Right? I think any immigrant, particularly, obviously if you come in at very young, you may not know what's going on, but at that age, in the middle of your teens, or something, because I was 15, I literally just turned 15, and this would have been 1996. It was definitely a culture shock to try to adapt. And my mom, who, as I mentioned, was educated, but here wasn't educated in the U.S., so and lacked the language necessary. So she worked in factories, worked 2 or 3 jobs, cleaning offices. In fact, my first job was cleaning an office with her in Back Bay. After school, go to school in Madison, come back, catch the train, go to Back Bay, to go clean offices, vacuuming offices like this, and so it was a tough transition. But early on realized the benefits of it too. I realized what a wonderful opportunity I had for myself. So. But that definitely was not an easy doing.
No, that sounds amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your education. You already said something, but so you went to high school.
Right. So I went to Madison Park High School, which people in Boston know what kind of schools it is. It's a voc tech school where they teach trade. A lot of it's largely immigrants and folk, students of color from the neighborhoods, again from Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and some of the other neighborhoods. So I was there for 3 years, and I did well. in school. One thing that I didn't mention, even though, like in Cape Verde, even though there was lack of, I guess, education at the high level, like I think back then, for instance, they didn't exist any college or universities, but our elders, our grandparents believed in school, in education, because they didn't have it. So even back in Cape Verde, education is highly stressed. So I studied often when I was a young boy and became a good student. And so that kind of translated to the U.S. Going to school here, I was a good student, but also was a bad kid to some extent, and maybe not a bad kid, but like I was a trouble kid, right? I would get into fights. Right. I'd get suspended. Right. I was not. Well, I was talking about the simulation part. Was not easy, right? And that's a lot of it was that they did not get along with administrators and students and so on. But so I graduated from Madison, thankful again to some teachers, particularly one up the street actually on Melville Avenue. Miss Baker, who's a retired teacher from Madison, was an English teacher who had a thing called College Club, where she literally took students to her own home and taught them how to get into college, right? Apply for schools. This is what the process is, because again, my mother didn't know that process, so she helped me get into UMass Amherst. I did well there, very well again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So what did you study?
I studied many different things actually. I think I was undecided from the beginning, and then I became a theater major. I became a communications major. I did various different things, but I ended up getting a degree in sociology with criminal justice concentration, as well as a degree in legal studies, because I wanted to be a lawyer, and then African American minor studies. So I did well with the not typical, I guess a lot of my friends, it was typical for me because a lot of my friends did it for like 5 years in college. I only did 3 years in high school, so I had to compensate for the extra year in college. But UMass was amazing. Beyond the education, though, to me, it was the first time where now I was out of my element in Dorchester of, hanging with my friends and being a trouble kid, right? Now it's about the next level of finding out who I was as an individual and exploring new skills, right? I was involved in many different organizations. I was a resident assistant RA for several years, so a lot of the skills that I would later need in life kind of started to appear, at UMass.
Yeah, that's great. So, I've already know because you brought your daughter. That's amazing.
Right.
I think that it's great to spend as much as you can with your kids, right?
Yes.
So, but tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay. After going to UMass, I went to Howard University School of Law, Washington D.C., which is where I met the woman of my life, the mother of my child, my wife Ashley. She also is an attorney, and I met her at Howard when I was a third year and she was a first year. She's a woman, wonderful woman from the South, and decided for some reason or another that she was going to come to Dorchester in the cold to be with me. So we got married 4 years ago. We have a beautiful 3-year-old girl who, as you mentioned, is with me today. In fact, my wife is out of town, and she loves actually going to meetings. Look at her. She's about to walk in.
That's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah?
It's okay. It's okay. Come on. She's obviously gonna. It's gonna be more.
Life.
It's gonna be more. She's gonna start crying. It's gonna be worse than. So yeah, this is. I feel life is good. Life has been good. I'm a 36 years old, and I've accomplished some pretty. Cool stuff. I think, but nothing more amazing than this.
Oh wow! Of course. Yeah. So I have a very important question, especially now understanding your background.
Mm-hmm.
Is what make you decide to be a political leader? Where that inspiration comes.
Honestly, the inspiration comes from two, maybe 3 reasons. One, my mother and my family always. My mom, even when she couldn't vote or she couldn't participate in the political world there, she always made sure she was informed. She was always pushing me to give back to the community, right? She taught me how to care, both her and my grandparents. And then secondly, growing up here, man, you see the issues, right? You see, I have friends that were deported to Cape Verdean killed. I have friends in jail now, and I could have been in prison, right? So the community that I come from, that we live, you have no if you're a conscious individual, went to school, or became an attorney particularly, you know, it's almost in your DNA to be political, to want to change the circumstances that you were raised in. So, you know, more young people in our communities can become lawyers and doctors and engineers and so on. So, you know, it's almost like, you know, in my DNA because of my upbringing, to want to give back to the community that I come from.
Well, there were a specific moment where you said, you know, I want to become an elected official.
You know, honestly, if there was one moment, was 2008. I graduated from law school. In fact, 2008 was a very significant year for me. It was the year I graduated from law school at Howard, and then a few months later, I became a U.S. citizen. I was still living in D.C. And was able to vote for Obama for the first time. When he first got elected, I remember the long lines, you know, in Maryland where I was living for people to vote. The excitement that he brought, you know, the hope that he talked about, and to be able to vote for him, and then of course he won. And I'm in D.C. at this point, and what I felt, and I'm sure what many felt throughout the country, was something that cannot be duplicated. So if there was one moment was the inspiration that I got from President Obama, and in fact I went to the swearing in, you know, thousands and thousands of people, and I can still remember how frigid it was as well too, very cold day, but that, you know, made me realize how much, you know, political figures have, you know, impact in the community. So if any one moment would have been that one that I thought, man, wow, okay, this I want to be able to create these kinds of changes in people's lives.
So, okay, let's go now to your role as a state representative.
Yes.
You are a state representative for the 5th Suffolk district. Where is this district, you know, where's the area? What's
okay.
The area that this district?
The 5th Suffolk district in the House of Representatives is about 44,000 people, and it's the location where we are. Essentially, the way I look at it is Fields Corner, all of Bowdoin, Geneva going this way, all of Grove Hall. So if you go the other way, Grove Hall, four corners up the street, Grove Hall, going down to Warren Gardens, and then going down to Blue Hill and Dudley, and then wrapping it around. So if you think about the main roads, it would be over here, it would be Dot Ave, Columbia Road, Blue Hill, and Warren, right? It's sort of like the middle. Have some parts of Roxbury, some parts of Dorchester in the middle.
Okay. How is the population here?
You know, in my district, actually, the district itself, the way it's designed, has the highest population of people of color in it, with about 94%, I think 94% minimum of people of color. Right?
It was assigned like that?
You know, obviously, I don't think necessarily it was designed like that,
okay,
but there were some districts. There are some districts throughout the state that are majority of people of color, right? And this just happens to be the highest. Has a lot of immigrant communities, where we are now, as you know, a lot of Vietnamese community in businesses and people living here. There's people from the Caribbean and Cape Verdean. There's a lot in the Bowdoin, Geneva area. You know, there's Haitians. There's certainly a lot of Latinos. So it's a very diverse community. You know, working class people often living below minimum wage. So it's a trouble, you know, community to some extent in terms of crime, in terms of housing prices that have risen tremendously over the years. So there's a lot of, you know, challenges, but there's also a lot of good. I mean, the food that you can eat in these neighborhoods is amazing. The restaurants, the culture that people bring to the table, the businesses. So it's a very, you know, it's a great district for that.
Okay, so what are, you know, you say something already, but what services are most needed here in this district? What do you think?
I think, you know, certainly dealing with housing, getting housing is a big issue right now. You know, and I don't think unique to this district, but it's no secret that Boston is being gentrified. That folks feel the pressure of rent, right, rising rent, which is too much, right? There's a booming economy in Boston with heavyweight, major construction happening, but a lot of the people, that are on the back end of that are the poor people that can't afford to live here. So there's a lot of services in terms of housing and the ability to buy homes, which actually up the street from here, there's this organization called MAHA, which I used to volunteer for, Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. They help people, buy homes, particularly, affordable options. They do classes that help you keep your homes. They have, affordable options in order for you to buy homes. So that's, I think, one of the critical things that's needed is that, is housing. Of course, education for our children continues to be a challenge. And finally, public safety, right? Feeling safe, right? Where sirens literally.
Two times.
There's one down the street. There was when I was driving. There was one on Bowden Street up near Ken Square there. So people feeling safe in the neighborhood. Yes, man. Yes, soon. Yeah. Let's Daddy finish this interview and then we'll go. Okay. Almost done. Okay. So I think feeling safe in our community is a major issue, man. And I live up the street in Uplands Corner. I used to live up here in Fields Corner. And it's not. In fact, my mom 2 weeks ago was picking my little girl in daycare in Roxbury, and she says she's in the car and she's about to get out, and his pop, right? And this is a woman who's approaching 70. So we've all sort of living under trauma and losing young people on a daily basis to gun violence. So.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unbelievable that here in America, people need to be living with fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, how do you think these issues that you have to say could be improved, for the well-being of neighbors?
There's obviously housing and public safety and education. Sort of like three major buckets, right? But they are intertwined. I think the state and the city, as well as the federal government, need to spend more resources in the community, other than resources to lock people up. In fact, there was a study that showed that in these neighborhoods that I mentioned, the state has spent more locking people up than anything else, right? Not on education, not on housing, right? And this is direct state funded, right? And I've been a state rep for 4 years. I've been trying to push not only to change which actually we did, just change the criminal justice system significantly, but also try to make sure that prioritize budget funding for youth services, for family services, for job training. So there's a lot that can be done to fix these social challenges. But at the end of the day, it's about funding. It's about priority. It's about people in the community, helping and pitching into.
Yeah, and that's part of your job.
My job, yes.
So, so there are some issues that we have identified, and we're almost done. One of the issues that I feel that is very important very difficult and complex, but at the same time very important to talk to, is about political participation.
Yes.
You may know, sometimes a state senator or state representative or almost any local elected official,
right.
got elected with a very low turnout, but it's something that is almost shameful. And I know that it's not obviously the fault of the elected official.
Right.
But now that you are, for example, already an elected official and you have this potential of change, how do you think this could be addressed?
I think this is a combination of several issues. One, as in America, people of color didn't get to vote until about 50 years ago or so, right? So, there's a lack of culture, I guess, to vote, right? Even though literally people have to die for the right to vote for African Americans and the people of color in the United States. So part of it, I think it's even though 50 years may sound like a lot, but it's not, right? In the history of a people, right? In the history of particularly African Americans who, you know, went through slavery for 400 years, right? Or you know, new immigrants in the neighborhoods that I mentioned, right? Who are not totally integrated in the community, right? And not participating politically. So that's one end. The other end, I think, is I honestly think there's people need to be inspired to vote for a particular candidate, right? Which again all goes back to the culture of voting. Some communities, folks vote no matter what, right? In our communities, I think, you know, people are dismayed with state and city and federal government for the same issues I just mentioned, right? They don't feel like they're getting the adequate resource. They don't feel like they getting a fair deal and a fair piece of advice. So why vote? Why vote doesn't matter. So you have to kind of teach them that it does matter. Because if you sit out just like you did, particularly in 2016, which many of us, 16? Yeah, 16. Many of us did. And then now you see that now we are all complaining and doing memes on social media every day and cussing, right? But you know, we could have impacted it in a different way. So you know, I think you know, I forget the exact policy, but the city has some policy in terms of developers being able to develop, you know, housing and include, I think it's 13% option, affordable option, right? I think that could be increased. There's also funding that, you know, if you opt out of doing affordable options, you can give funding to build it elsewhere. That money could be increased as well in terms of how much money you donate to that pot to build affordable options. And again, there's organizations that are working hard on this. I think, like I said, I met with Maha up the street not too long ago, and that's some of the movements that they're pushing. There's a lot of pressure on everybody to do something about housing.
Okay, what about jobs and economy? How can we improve here in the district and
Training. I mean, one of the basic things that can be done right now is the use of National Park High School, right, where I went to high school, where, you know, students, at least when I was going there, would come out of there straight with out of high school with the ability to feed their families, start a company because they got a trade, right? The reality is that, you know, the college economy driven is not always appropriate for everybody, right? And what's happening to those that can't go to college in our neighborhoods? I think, you know, Madison could serve as a training ground as it had in the past. It could not only that for the students but also for adults, right? After school's over, it should be open 24/7 almost, right? And then using that school particularly to sort of, which I've been helping with, and got some state funding for them to do, is to and not only focus on traditional Volk Tech, as we know, you know, mechanic, auto body, and the like, but also evolve into the 21st century to include things like coding, computer science, where, you know, the high-tech industry is going now, which again they're thinking about, but I think we could do more. And that's something simple that can be done in our communities that can help alleviate with the drought of you know, of jobs in the community.
Yeah, we're almost done. So, okay, I have two last questions or issues. One is immigration. That's something that definitely is like a mainstream
it's a big issue,
debate,
right? Yeah, yeah.
And especially you as an immigrant that have a more moral voice.
Yes.
So what can you say to the immigrants in the district and in the city on how to address this situation? And, you know, how can everything?
You know, I think we just got to keep our heads down and keep working. I mean, the narrative that particularly President Trump has brought is that immigrants are criminal. They're raping, they're killing people, right? They're bringing drugs into our communities, and that's not. In fact, it's not. Yeah, please, Daddy's talking. When this is in fact not the case, right? That in fact I was reading a study that showed that particularly areas, metro areas and cities throughout the country.
And also you are an example.
Right. Exactly. So I think, we have to essentially challenge the narrative, right? That others are creating now. We're bad. They were bringing guns. They were drug dealers, right? By examples, as you mentioned, like mine, and for examples like me, to fight for it. I mean, immigration rights and immigration issues has been at the forefront of some of the things that I've done, whether we talk about sanctuary cities or sanctuary state, which is a bill that I also been fighting to get done in the state to make sure that police officers and law enforcement community are not just holding people and grabbing people to give twice. So we keep working hard and we keep challenging the narrative by doing good work and showing that we care and contribute to society.
Okay, last question is about police and justice.
Right.
That is something, well, as I told you, I think that it's very concerned that people here in Boston specifically, or in America as a whole, need to live in this kind of fear.
Right, right.
So I know that the police is, trying to do their best or trying to solve the situation. I'm not sure if that's the only way to solve it, but there is a specific issue that is very recently very got attention from us, and is that the police is trying to implement drones, like here in Dorchester and here in the city. So
right.
They haven't implemented. They're gonna do some community groups or community conversations. But what can you say to the neighbors about this, and how can this be addressed?
Yeah, I mean the police community relationship, it's at the forefront of American society right now, right? What we've seen over the last several years, particularly of black men being killed and without accountability, right, by police officers throughout the country. We're thankful that in the city of Boston, those sort of egregious situations have not happened, but it still contributes to how we feel, right? Because even some of the issues are still happening at the lower level, discrimination or racial profiling. In fact, we saw a video down the street from here where a Boston police officer essentially was profiling a young black man and calling him names and essentially disrespecting the young man that was walking in daylight, right? So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of police and community relationships. In terms of some of the tools that you're talking about, whether drone, people talk about video cameras or body cameras. I mean, these are discussions that must be had, right? I think we should have and come to a conclusion in terms of whether we're gonna have police gonna be allowed to have drones and to do what with them, right? Because just like anything else before this, in terms of police getting new tools, another thing that they're talking about changing is the wiretap laws, right? And so many other tools. So whenever those happen, there's a community and societal concern with privacy rights, right? And what the information will be, right? And where would they be? Could they just, which they can do actually, to just go over someone's home with their, unless they got a warrant, right? With the drone or with any camera whatsoever, right? This is constitutional law. So I think law enforcement and community, in terms of our community, there's two components. One is the tension that's built in now. So something that's always been there in terms of police and communities that they serve, particularly communities of color, black communities, in terms of what we've seen in history, right? There's that, and then there's the general tension between police and the tools that they need and privacy rights and the big brother, right? Why are we able to go into our cell phones? It's something which is recently litigated by the Supreme Court. Say police can't just grab your phone and go through your photos and do all of those things without a warrant, right? Because my phone has my bank account information in there, has my social security, has so many my date of birth, right? So it's private. It's not a public tool, right? So I think this particular drone is just one more of these. This is new now, new world. How do we deal with police being able to go on Facebook, right, and monitor, which is another issue that I've heard, monitor, whether they say gang members or whoever, right? To some extent, that's a different issue in the sense that if you post something on Facebook, and that is, you don't have an expectation of privacy there, to some extent, right? Because you made it public, but should they go and find, and use some sort of tool and find your messages, or and see what kind of pictures you deleted, right? That then becomes a different conversation. But the police community relation and pull and tug, it's fascinating as an attorney, right? As an attorney who studied constitutional law, but also as a person who grew up in these communities, I understand personally how police is perceived. So there's a distrust that needs to be fixed. So we need to build more trust with the police.
How can that be fixed?
That can be, in many different ways. One of the key ways is making sure that police reflect the communities that they serve, right? Whether that is increasing diversity, right, in the police department, which I think the police has come a long way. To have police officers. It's one thing to see a police officer that you grew up with and knows you or know your parents. It's another thing to see a police officer you never seen, who's chest out, from a different neighborhood, different parts of the state, sometimes different parts of the country, who doesn't understand the community, right? So that's first and foremost, is what we call cultural competence to serve the community. So they need to do better. The second part of it is to keep training the officers that they have. In fact, the state law now is that going forward is that all police departments throughout the state will be required to do what's called the implicit bias training for all police officers, right? That's important. That means, particularly again, when we're dealing with communities of color, what kind of biases do you have that necessarily, that's subconscious, that's helping you lead in your decision making, right? So we need to fix those issues. So training is very important, and most importantly, though, I think is accountability, right? Is holding police accountable, holding law enforcement community accountable for when they make mistakes, whether intentional or unintentional.